New beginnings can be terrifying, even paralyzing for some, such as the main character in Melanie Mah's first novel, The Sweetest One. But this new beginning, as a novelist, has turned out pretty well for her. Her debut effort won this year's English Language Trillium Book Award. That's Ontario's top literary prize, and we're pleased that it brings Melanie Mah to our studio tonight. Well, congratulations are in order for starters, right? Well done.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Big award, first book.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking.
Where did the idea for this come from in the first place?
Well, it is quite a sad book. You know, it's about a girl who has lost a lot of her siblings, and I lost one of my siblings.
In real life, you did?
Yeah, in real life.
And in the book, the character has lost numerous.
Yeah. So the whole idea came from the sibling that I lost was the one that's next to me in age. I'm the youngest child in my family, and he died when he was 23, and I was 21. So as I was approaching like his 23rd birth, or like my own 23rd birthday, I was wondering, well, what if I die this year too? In the novel, the siblings all die at the age of 18, and the main character, Chrysler, is 17 years old.
Okay, a bunch of follow-ups. Why did you feel a need to write about this?
I guess I'm not sure. Why did I think sometimes some stories just like take a hold of you and they don't let go, you know. I think I could really understand what it was for her to lose a sibling. It was something that, you know, like feelings I'd been grappling with for a long time. And yeah, just going through that, I think was tough, but like probably writing about it helped me to process some of the feelings.
So did you feel, in fact, better about your own personal life when you wrote this fictitious life?
Well, I would say like by the time I was actually set to writing it, it was like some years after he died, like maybe 7 or so years after. But it's like the story has been in my mind for sure. And I guess, did it make me feel better? Like, I think it made me feel more settled, you know? There's like this thing in psychology where like if you're, like if you have been subject to like a traumatic event, like if you subject yourself again and again to it, like it starts to lose its power over you. Even like that sounds very dark and difficult, but
no, it makes sense though. And you have found that to be the case in your case?
Yeah, I think so. I would say so.
But it took a long time, right? From the germ of an idea to this book actually getting done.
Yes.
Long time.
Yes.
How many years?
Well, from the actual germ of it, like, so I was 21 at the time, and to publication, I think I was maybe 34 or 35.
You still look 21.
Thank you so much. As for the writing itself, it was like about 7 or 8 years. I would say it's not because like people say, oh, you like work so hard on it, and it's true, but I would say that some of that was like also nerves, you know, like you, there's something about when you want something so much, you know, sometimes, like if you go for something and there's almost this feeling of like coming to a cliff edge and being like, oh, well, like, you know, and it's like too scary to even contemplate.
A couple more questions about you before we get into the actual story, and that is, there aren't too many people in this country who can actually make a living just writing.
Yeah.
And until this book, you weren't one of them.
No.
So what else did you do to pay the bills before you could actually write full-time for a living?
Well, I mean, like I've done like an amount of like freelancing in terms of like writing and various forms of editing. I've done like retail jobs, like it's...
Like what?
Well, like I've worked in like a health food store, like I worked in, actually worked in 2 health food stores. I've worked in my parents' store a fair bit.
Well, that
like,
you did when you were a kid, right?
Yeah. But like in university and like other times, like I would go back there for sure.
But now you've won the Trillium Prize. What do you get for winning the Trillium Prize?
It's $20,000.
That's better than a kick in the head.
Yeah,
okay,
it is.
So is life different?
I would say that it is different from the perspective of like getting more critical attention. This book, when it first came out, like this is the first thing I ever published. Like many writers publish stories or something else first, but this was my very first thing, so that's a little bit unusual. but it also means that like not a lot of people had heard of me, and so you know it was hard to get an agent, and it was hard to get noticed from critics and from larger publishers and this kind of thing.
How did you convince a publisher to take a shot on a never-before-published author?
Well, I feel like many things that happen in publishing happen because of networking, and I'm actually really bad at networking. I'm quite a shy person. So in this case, like, so I did a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Writing, and one of the people who was teaching us, like, it was a class about presenting your work on stage, you know, like in performance. She told us to bring a few pages of our work, and so I did, and she really liked it, and she was like, oh, I know a publisher that could maybe help you out, and you know, the rest is history.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let's do an excerpt from the book here. Here's from The Sweetest One. I'm trying hard not to tell her I'm probably going to die within the next 19 months. There's a lot of ways to die, probably more than there are ways to live. You can get hit by a car, get a bad case of food poisoning, be the victim of armed robbery. Maybe you crash your bike or come down with something. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, bronchitis, lupus, Ebola, diabetes, complications from diabetes. That's your character Chrysler under pressure from a guidance counselor, basically to apply to a university. Your Chrysler has a very, as the excerpt suggests, a very dim view of the future.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, I guess it just comes from growing up with like sibling after sibling dying on her. So there is the death, and I think her parents are...
She doesn't get on with the parents either, though.
Well, she sort of does and she sort of doesn't. Like, you know, she really loves them, but, you know, she loves them despite their faults, and there are lots of faults. They have, like, kind of taught her how, you know, taught her that the world is not safe, you know, and I think that's sometimes how... like that might be the experience of like some immigrants, you know, who have been
that
like,
was their story.
Yeah, exactly. Like subject to like various forms of racism, or like if they had grown up as the father did, like, you know, in peasant circumstances where, you know, like life was very grim and like he had to protect his life very dearly in order to keep living. Like, you know, that these are life skills that you pass on to a child, but then, you know, it's difficult. They do become hindrances eventually, because...
Melanie, I'm not going to pretend that this is brilliant insight, but I did notice Spring Hills is Rocky Mountain House.
Yes.
And Chrysler sure sounds a lot like you. And Chrysler's parents sure seem a lot like your parents. And the fact that you want to bring this picture up? I mean, Chrysler's parents run a little store, and there's your family store there on the, that's Rocky Mountain House, Alberta?
Yep, it is. That's Main Street.
And where's the store that your folks had?
The store is like that. There's Henry's Western Wear, kind of like in the third left of the photograph, like the edge of it. Yeah, with the white and yellow sign.
So
right there.
My brilliant insight here, Melanie, is that you've basically written an autobiography, but just sort of changed the names to protect the innocent and the guilty. Yes?
To some degree, possibly.
To some degree, yeah.
You know, like a lot of details have been changed. I think, you know, I also wrote it as like a love letter, sort of to my hometown. You know, it's like very difficult for Chrysler to be growing up in a town like this. You know, like she's something of an outsider. The time of life that Chrysler is in, you know, where there's like, despite herself, you know, despite her own thoughts of her coming end, you know, there is so much possibility in her life, and that's something that I feel like can be apprehended like many times in the book.
Although I guess when you moved to Toronto and you noticed you were not just one of 3 Asian faces in this city, but there were a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, it was really amazing. Toronto is, so I've also lived in Edmonton. I lived like briefly in San Francisco, and I would say Toronto by far is like the first place I've ever felt like fully comfortable in. You know, I really feel like, I wouldn't say it's like that I feel like I'm not an ethnic minority, but like the diversity is such that like I just feel comfortable walking down the street, and I don't feel like I'm being scrutinized, or like I don't feel like, you know, I'm just one of a few. Like I just, it's really nice.
This is probably not the right expression, What do you? There's no such thing as no man's land anymore, right? Because that's sexist. So what do you say now? No person's land. But you know what you get what I'm driving at here, which is as a Chinese Canadian in rural Alberta. I mean, you weren't Chinese like your parents were Chinese.
Yeah.
You weren't Canadian like anybody else in the town either. Do you feel kind of rootless in those circumstances?
I wouldn't say. Well, I mean, it is complicated. I feel like that my roots are in both, like my Chinese side and like my Canadian side, although like that's sort of a false dichotomy.
Yes.
Like, I would say that the roots are there. Like it's not as clear cut as some other person, like, you know, whose family might have been in Canada for generations. But, you know, like it's, I feel like that there must be like some plants, you know, that like bring down roots in like different parts of the soil, you know, and not be like a tree where it's just like one, you know, like large set of roots.
Nice metaphor.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to ask you, and this is hardly the focus of the book, but it did certainly cross my mind reading it. One of the saddest exports, whether it's Northern Alberta or Northern Ontario, one of the saddest exports are young people.
Yes.
And when they become Chrysler's age, or, you know, high teens, and it's time to think about the future, a lot of them go off to university or college and don't come back.
Yeah.
And I want to know how you sort of figured, I'm not going to give anything away and talk about what Chrysler's decision was, but how do you sort of resolve in your own head how we're going to figure our way around all of that? Because obviously if every successive generation leaves and doesn't come back, I mean, it's an existential crisis for the more remote parts of our country.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and I think there are some community groups, like, you know, in rural places or in smaller towns, you know, who kind of try to make life like more livable and, like, you know, sustainable for the young people who live there. But, you know, like urbanization has been a trend for so long. It's really hard to say, you know, like what can happen, you know, or like how, like even what's best to happen.
I mean, the town you grew up in is, I mean, it's not a few hundred people, right? It's a few thousand people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's, I guess, got a shot at being there in 50 years' time, but you never know.
Yeah. I mean, it is incredibly sad, you know, to imagine that a place where so much of one's history has occurred, you know, might just not exist. But I don't think that's going to happen. You know, there's like it's somewhat thriving, like the economy there. There's like farming, like ranching. There's like forestry. There's like various like oil things happening there. So.
Oil in Alberta?
Yeah.
Go figure.
Oh yeah. Who knew?
Let's do another excerpt from the book here. Here's from Melanie Mah's The Sweetest One. My mom nagged, and my dad yelled, and we never saw Jean at dinner again. Thing about my parents, they've never quite understood certain basic things about parenting. 1, you attract more flies with honey. 2, some kids are rebellious and don't want to be controlled. 3, parents are not the kings and queens of their homes. They are not cobblers with faulty machines that miraculously work when they hit them, or shopkeepers that might succeed if only they worked and ran hard enough. Life doesn't work like that. It's something we kids came by the hard way. My parents probably never learned. There really is a very, I mean, it's a sad book, but there's a funny intergenerational problem between, you know, I guess you and your parents and the characters and her parents in the book.
Sure.
Is that irresolvable?
I don't think so. You know, like, as mentioned, you know, that there are similarities between my parents and Chrysler's parents, but I think, you know, like if Chrysler can live to be, say, my age, like I think some things do resolve themselves, you know.
Think about what you just said, though. I mean, this is admittedly a fictitious character.
Sure.
If your fictitious character can live to be the age that you are right now,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a given for 99.9% of the people in this country.
Yeah.
But from the tragic circumstances from which your character finds herself, that would be a huge accomplishment, given all the suffering that's happened in that family.
For sure.
Oof.
For sure. so like in the moment itself, I would say that, you know, maybe it isn't resolvable, but I do think that, like, with age, with time, you know, like parents can mellow out, say, or like children can become adults and like sort of come to understand why parents are the way they are, like grow to be more patient, like. I think like Chrysler's problem with her parents is that, like, in some ways they're just too similar, you know, they're like both impatient, or they're impetuous, or very emotional, or, you know, and so.
Have your parents read the book?
I think like my mom read some of it, and she said to me, they swear a little bit too much in this book.
Well, you do drop the odd F-bomb, don't you?
Yeah, I think I do.
And Papa?
No, I don't think so. You know, like he's not really, like he's lived in Canada for like maybe 60 or like many years, maybe closer to 70 years. But yeah, he's not much of like a reader in terms of like English books. Like he reads the paper every day in Chinese, but you know.
Are you, well, how do you feel about the fact that your parents have not read this award-winning book?
It's complicated, you know. I don't know like to what degree my mom has read it. Like I know that she's tried, and I imagine that she dips into it from now.
If they were to read this book, I can see them coming to you and saying, "Is this what you think of us?
Yeah.
Is this how we seem to you?"
Maybe. I mean, the thing is, like, there are elements of fiction there for sure, but yeah, I guess. you know, like I think I've vindicated myself a little bit with this award. You know.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. Have you been back home to Alberta since you won the Trillium?
Yeah, I have been back actually.
What kind of a welcome did you get?
Oh, actually, sorry. I did say that, but I think I came back like a few weeks before I won, so like they didn't know.
Oh, they didn't know yet. All right.
I'll be in Alberta in October, like to do some promotion, to appear at a festival and like my hometown library. So like we'll see. Like,
Do you wonder what kind of reception you're going to get?
I do wonder.
Yeah, because you know, not everybody's going to love the way you know certain parts of rural life have been portrayed in the book, right?
I suppose so, but I do hope that like you know the love of the place like is apparent. You know, like it's not a place that I hold any ill will towards. Like it's just
that does come through.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Just finally, what's next for you? I imagine you're writing. This is not going to be the one and only book.
I hope not. I hope not.
You got another one in you?
I think so. Like at the time of the award, like like right before I had won it, I wasn't sure. You know, I was working on something, but like I wasn't feeling terribly confident. But like you know, the award has really given me a bit of a spring in my step. I'm writing an intergenerational memoir right now. So just like about, you know, like the various like immigration stories in my family, and like the various settlement stories. Like my father lived, you know, kind of like hopped through like various towns in the prairies, like chasing like restaurant jobs, and you know, so that's fascinating to me. Like I've visited my parents' hometowns, and it's like interesting to see, you know, like what kind of leaps they've made from there to here. Like, you know, it's like really given me a lot of perspective on like who they are, and like in turn like who I am too.
That seems like a very logical follow-up to this book.
Yeah, I think so.
Congratulations on The Sweetest One, a novel, Melanie Mah's first, and we're assured not last.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. Thanks for coming into TVO tonight.
Thanks a lot.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.